Police officers, what case still keeps you awake at night? We found the missing girl's backpack inside a house that had burned down 3 days before she vanished. I was still a rookie when it happened, which might be part of why it stuck with me this long. Your first year as a cop, you expect car accidents, domestic calls, maybe the occasional bar fight. You don't expect something like this. You don't expect to stare at something that should be impossible, and then be told to file it under open and ongoing until it quietly disappears. This was in 2006 in a small town in upstate New York called Glenwyn Hollow. Population at the time was just under 3,000. One diner, one gas station, a volunteer fire department, and not much else. I joined the force straight out of academy. My shift partner was an older guy named Rios, been on the job for over 20 years. He wasn't much of a talker, but he knew everything about everyone in town. I trusted him. I still do. He's the only reason I didn't completely lose my mind. The girl's name was Emily Rowe, 11 years old, brown hair, big front teeth she was still growing into. Her mom, Carol, reported her missing on a Thursday night. Said Emily had walked home from school but never made it back. Carol swore she waited at the kitchen table from 2:30 onward. I didn't even turn the TV on, she said, so I wouldn't miss the sound of her steps. It was the kind of thing that stuck with me. The school confirmed Emily left just after the final bell. No known issues. Her teacher said she was a good kid. A little quiet, always doodling in the margins of her worksheets. She draws maps a lot, the woman told me. Little neighborhoods and parks. I think she wants to be a city planner or something. We canvassed the area. Neighbors hadn't seen her. One elderly woman 2 blocks down claimed she saw a girl walking slow, holding something shiny in her hand. Said it looked like a key, the kind with a long stem, like for a jewelry box. She didn't think anything of it at the time. The first strange part was that Emily's backpack was missing, not just from her, but from her home. Her mom said it was a pink and gray JanSport with a keychain that said ER in glittery letters. She was never without it, Carol told me. She'd take it to the bathroom if I let her. We logged the missing person report, set up the alerts. We didn't have an Amber Alert. There wasn't enough proof of abduction, but we had volunteers combing the trails by that weekend. 3 days later, the house on Marley Street caught fire. It was already an abandoned property, had been for years. Local kids said it was haunted because of course they did. Every small town's got one of those houses. This one had been gutted by a fire back in '93, but for some reason the shell hadn't been demolished. The place was structurally unsound, boards over the windows, half the roof gone. The fire was called in by a guy walking his dog around 6:10 in the morning. He saw smoke rising out of the second-story window. Fire department got there fast, managed to put it out before the whole thing collapsed. They said the fire looked like it had started in the hallway upstairs, but they didn't find any accelerants, no sign of squatters or animals. When we showed up to make sure no one had been inside, Rios and I stepped through what used to be the front door. Everything smelled like wet soot and old wood. The place was a blackened husk, charred beams, ash thick on the floor. We didn't expect to find anything, but we did. The backpack was sitting at the top of the stairs, perfectly clean, not a speck of soot on it. Pink and gray, with an ER keychain hanging from the zipper. Rios and I just stood there staring at it. My first thought was that someone planted it. But how would anyone get in there during the fire? There were no fresh footprints in the ash. The second floor was unstable, even the firefighters hadn't gone up. But there it was, like someone had placed it there gently just before we arrived. We bagged it. Inside we found her school notebooks, a drawing of a park labeled Woodland South, and a plastic zip case with 3 markers, a pencil, and that same strange key the neighbor described. Long stem, old-fashioned, looked like it belonged to a chest or maybe a music box. No fingerprints. Not even Emily's forensics couldn't explain how the pack had survived the fire without damage. It wasn't just sitting there before the fire, one of them told me. That spot was scorched. You can see the marks on the walls. He showed me photos. The exact place where we found the bag had been burned before the bag showed up. That was when things got harder to ignore. We checked Emily's sketches from school, hoping to find clues. In one, we noticed something odd. She'd drawn the street she lived on. But halfway down the block, she'd added a house that didn't exist. It was labeled the Quiet House. It was the same shape as the one on Marley Street, same porch, same window layout, only in her drawing the second story was drawn in color, bright yellow, and a caption beneath it read, "Where the maps begin." I started digging into the history of the Marley Street house. Here's what I found. The original owners, the Goodwins, had a daughter named Lila. In 1965, Lila disappeared the same week the house suffered its first fire. A kitchen blaze blamed on faulty wiring. Her body was never found. Then in 1980, another girl went missing in the area. Age 11, a different last name, no family connection to the Goodwins. A week later, someone found her bracelet behind the Marley house. She was never recovered either. In 1993, another fire. This time, the Goodwins had long since moved. No residents, no official cause. The report simply said origin indeterminate. Each time a girl disappeared. Each time something from her turned up in or near the Marley property. And now, in 2006, Emily Rowe at this point, I started to feel like I was being watched. I don't mean that in a paranoid way. I mean it physically, that prickling at the back of your neck, the way you catch a flicker of movement in your peripheral vision. It was strongest when I drove past the house, which I started doing more often, even though I told myself not to. I stopped sleeping well. I started dreaming of staircases, ones that led downward forever, even though the Marley house didn't have a basement. In those dreams, I'd hear something, not a voice but a pattern like breathing that followed its own rhythm. One night, I swore I saw the backpack again, this time at the bottom of the staircase, glowing faintly like it was waiting for me. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, and the sound would stay in my ears for minutes after I opened my eyes. Weeks passed, then months, then years. We never found Emily. Carol moved away 2 years later. I don't know where she is now. I heard she doesn't talk about it. The Marley house finally got torn down in 2011. Some preservationists tried to stop it, claiming it had historic relevance, but no one wanted to fight. The town was sick of the stories, but here's the part that still keeps me up. Before they leveled it, I went inside one last time. They let me because I was the responding officer on the original fire report. I walked up the stairs slowly, like I was retracing something I didn't fully remember. At the top on the landing, the walls were different, not burned anymore. They were drawn on. Light sketches, pencil, faint, almost invisible. I couldn't make out the whole picture, but I recognized the outline of streets, trees, a place labeled Woodland South, and beneath it all, in a child's handwriting. I had to leave the map somewhere. That was almost 15 years ago. I still don't know where she went, but sometimes, when I'm driving at night out past town where the woods start getting thick, I catch something in the corner of my eye, a house that isn't on any GPS, and a little girl standing in the window holding a pink and gray backpack, watching, waiting, drawing. I kept the copy of the drawing, the one from the upstairs wall. I'd snapped a photo of it on my flip phone just before the crew came in with demolition gear. It's low resolution, grainy, but it's enough. I printed it and pinned it to the wall in my apartment just behind a cabinet where no one could see unless they were looking for it. I started tracing the map. Not literally. I didn't put pen to paper, but in my head, I memorized every labeled corner: Woodland South, the Shell Grove, the place with the bell. Names that don't exist on any town register or topographic chart. But they sounded real, not fantastical, not the kind of names a kid makes up. They sounded old, local, like they'd once meant something but had been lost. I asked Rios once, years after we both left the force, if he ever heard of those places. He didn't look surprised. He just said, "Some names don't stay on maps. Doesn't mean they're not still there." That stuck with me. Rios never talked about the Marley house after he retired. Said it gave him headaches. Said the older he got, the more he dreamed of it. I asked him once what the dreams were like. He said he always saw a hallway, one that stretched too far for the size of the house, with doors on either side that kept getting closer together, until they weren't doors anymore, just slits, like something was trying to squeeze in. He told me to stop asking, told me I'd end up like him. I didn't push. The dreams didn't stop, not for me, not for him, and not apparently for others either. It started with an email, no subject line, just one sentence: "You saw the backpack too, didn't you?" No sender I recognized, but it wasn't spam. The return address was strange, like a random string of initials and numbers, but when I replied, it didn't bounce. I asked who they were. They responded the next morning. My sister disappeared in '93. Her name was Alyssa Cray. They found her shoelace tied to the mailbox at 41 Marley. My parents said it was just a coincidence, but I know what I saw in her sketchbook. That name, Alyssa Cray, hadn't come up in any of the official reports, not in our database, not even in the old Glenwyn newspaper archives. But when I checked the property registry, the Cray family had, in fact, rented a house just down the block from Marley Street in 1993. I wrote back. They sent me a scan. It was a drawing, faint, torn in the corner. It showed a figure, a child, standing at the top of a staircase. The perspective was all wrong, the angle too sharp, almost like the walls were closing in. In the lower left corner, written in the same hand as Emily's maps, "We hear the bell when they draw too close." I didn't know what it meant, but then I remembered something. The night I stood in the burned-out house, just before I found the drawing, I'd heard a noise, soft, distant. At the time I thought it was my nerves, my own heartbeat, but now I was sure of it. A bell, faint, like a church tower 2 towns over. When I told Rios, he went quiet. for a long time. Then he told me something I wish he hadn't. He said in 1980, when he was still a young cop himself, he responded to a noise complaint near the Marley property. A woman reported hearing a ringing bell at exactly 2:17 a.m. every night for a week. She swore it was coming from underground, said it made the floors hum. Her husband didn't hear it, neither did the neighbors, just her, always her. Rios visited the house on the 5th night, waited in the dark, nothing but a thermos and a half-dead flashlight. At exactly 2:17 a.m. he heard it, 3 slow chimes, like metal echoing off stone. He said it made his eyes water. He said he didn't file a full report, didn't want it on paper. Some sounds, he said, don't belong above ground. That was the last time I saw Rios in person. He passed away 2 years later. Natural causes, heart failure. But when I went to his funeral, I saw his daughter sitting by herself in the back pew. She was holding something in her lap, a folded piece of paper. After the service, I asked her about it. She looked at me confused. "You knew my dad pretty well, right?" I nodded. She unfolded the paper and handed it to me. It was a sketch, not recent, worn at the edges but familiar. A hallway, too long, too narrow, and the same words written carefully in the bottom corner. Marley Street is a memory, not a place. I didn't sleep that night. I don't sleep much these days. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see that staircase, the one from my dreams. I start at the top, and every step down feels colder, not in temperature but in spirit, like I'm descending out of something I was never supposed to be in. I still have Emily's drawing, still have the picture of the upstairs wall, but I've stopped trying to make sense of it, because I don't think it wants to be solved. I think it just wants to remain a memory, a map, a door, and maybe that's why the case never closed, because it wasn't a case, it was an opening, and we were the ones who turned the handle. So yeah, that's the one that keeps me awake at night, not because of what we found, but because of what we left behind. I moved out of Glenwyn Hollow 5 years ago. I didn't tell anyone, just packed my things into a rented van, left the keys in the mailbox, and drove until I hit a town that didn't show up on most road maps. A place with no real internet, no cell signal unless the wind's right, and no one who asks too many questions. I told myself I needed quiet, space to forget, but that's the thing about memory, it doesn't ask your permission to return. It just shows up, uninvited, quiet, like a soft knock at the door that you almost convince yourself you didn't hear. I kept telling myself I was done with it. With the drawings, with the dreams, with the bell. I stopped checking the email, burned the printouts, boxed up Emily's sketch, Alyssa's torn page, the old police reports Rios had photocopied and never officially filed. But about a year ago, something changed. It started with a kid, maybe 8 or 9, who showed up at the corner store while I was buying coffee. I didn't recognize him. No one did. The store owner said he wandered in and just stood near the door holding something in his hands. It was a map hand-drawn, black ink, sharp angles. I got a good look at it as the clerk bent down to ask him where his parents were. The kid didn't answer, just stared straight ahead on the map. Right in the middle was a label I hadn't seen in years, the place with the bell. I stepped toward him, quiet, slow. But before I could say a word, he looked at me, not around me, at me, and in the calmest voice I've ever heard from a child he said, "It opens again soon." Then he walked out. No one followed. We didn't know where to. He was gone before we even reached the door. That night, I dug everything back up. The box, the notes, the photos. I pinned it all to the walls of my trailer, covered every square inch like I was trying to rebuild the town from memory. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe I just needed to prove to myself I hadn't imagined it all. But then I saw it, across multiple maps, Emily's, Alyssa's, even one from a forgotten box of Glenwyn PD archives labeled simply Unknown, Unresolved 1987, the paths, the layouts, the sketches, they'd all been rotating subtly, almost imperceptibly. But when aligned over each other and turned just right, something clicked, a symbol appeared, not a word, not a name, just 5 interlocking rings, each with a dot in the center. I'd seen that before. It was carved faintly into the stone of the Marley House foundation the day it was demolished. A contractor told me it looked like a brand. Never seen concrete that marked this deep, he'd said. You'd need pressure and precision. Like it was made from the inside. I thought he meant an industrial stamp, but now I'm not so sure, because 2 weeks ago I started hearing the bell again. Not in dreams, in real life, always at 2:17 a.m., 3 chimes, then silence. And I'm not the only one. 2 days ago, I got a letter, handwritten, no return address. The paper was old, folded carefully. Inside was a single sentence. They've redrawn the house. No signature, just a date, August 8th. I know that date. It's the same day Lila Goodwin vanished in 1965. Same day the first fire report was logged on Marley Street. The same day Emily's teacher said she started drawing houses with no windows. I think something's restarting, or resurfacing. I don't know what the bell means, but I think it's not a warning, I think it's a signal, and I think more people are hearing it now. If you're reading this, maybe you've heard it too. Maybe you've driven past a house that didn't used to be there. Maybe you've seen a drawing left behind on a desk or a napkin, or in your own kid's backpack. A house, a tunnel, a street that curves too far in. If you have, don't follow it, don't try to finish the map, and for God's sake, don't listen too long when the bell rings, because whatever's drawing those streets is getting closer. August 8th came and went without incident, or maybe I just didn't see it. The thing about patterns is they don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they're already happening and you're just catching up. You think something's about to happen, but it already has, somewhere in the background, in the dark corner of a town no longer on any map. 2 days after the 8th, I got a call from a woman I hadn't heard from in years, former dispatcher from Glenwyn, name's Judy, retired, smoked too much, knew everything. She said, "You ever look into the Roe case again?" My chest tightened. "Why, there's something you should see." She sent me a photo, blurry, taken through a dirty car window. It was a child, couldn't see her face, just the outline of a girl in a raincoat standing at the edge of an empty field near where the Marley house used to be. Nothing around her, not even tire tracks, just her, still in her hand, a backpack, pink and gray, with a glittery ER keychain. Judy said it showed up on a trail cam posted by a local wildlife volunteer. The camera had been set to take stills every 30 seconds. She forwarded the full series. Here's the thing. In the first photo, the field is empty. In the second, she's standing there. In the third, she's gone. No blur, no movement, just absence. The time code, 2:17 a.m. I didn't sleep for days after that. I kept the photos, printed them, pinned them to the wall with the rest, but it felt wrong, like I was preserving something that shouldn't exist, something that wants to exist only in fragments, like a dream you're not supposed to recall fully. Then the handwriting started showing up. It began small, a word here, a phrase there, on envelopes, on the margin of junk mail, on receipts I'd swear were blank when I first saw them, always in a child's hand. I left the door open. Follow the bell. They're not lost, they're just not all the way here. I showed no one. Who would believe me? But I noticed something worse. The writing only appeared on things I'd discarded. Scraps, garbage, like someone or something was digging through my life from the bottom up, as if it was reconstructing me backwards. One night I went outside around 2 am, just needed air. I live in the middle of nowhere, so the sky's usually full of stars, but that night, nothing, just clouds, and quiet. Then came the chimes, soft, metallic, 3, and then a fourth that was new. It was lower, heavier, like something larger had awakened. Not just the echo of memory, but a presence, one that had been waiting for the cycle to complete, for enough people to remember, for enough maps to be drawn. I backed inside, locked the doors, sat with my back to the wall until sunrise. Since that night, I haven't heard the bell again, but I have noticed something different. A house down the road from where I live, maybe a quarter mile. I walk by it every few days. It used to be just a patch of overgrown brush, but recently, a structure's appeared there, bit by bit. Foundation first, then a frame, then siding. No construction equipment, no workers. It's not listed on any county permit, no address number, but every time I pass, the porch light is on, and sometimes, if I get close enough, I swear I hear a noise from inside, a mechanical clicking, like a pen against paper, like someone drawing. I don't know what's going to happen next, maybe nothing, maybe everything. But I've started packing again, not because I think I can escape. I don't, but because if that house is almost finished, I think someone's about to move in, and I think they've been trying to get back for a long time. So if one day you get a package you don't remember ordering, or find a map you never drew, or hear a bell in the middle of the night, don't follow it, don't trace the roads, don't finish the drawing. Because once you complete the map, you're no longer reading it, you're part of it. I thought about burning everything, the maps, the photos, the sketches, the crumbling notebook I found tucked in the wall of my old place before I left. I sat on the floor of the trailer one night, lighter in one hand, the stack in the other. But I didn't, because I think that's part of it. I think the forgetting is how it spreads, not like a virus, not fast, not explosive, but quiet. Like rot under paint. You think the wood's fine until your hand goes through it, and by then, too late. I went back to Glenwyn once, just once, didn't tell anyone. Drove all night. I just wanted to see it again, make sure it was still real. The town hadn't changed much, new paint on old buildings, a coffee shop where the hardware store used to be, but the bones were the same. Marley Street was gone. The land had been bought by some out-of-town developer, cleared, re-leveled. Supposedly for a community space. Nothing had been built yet, just a long stretch of grass and packed dirt surrounded by a chain-link fence. But I noticed something strange. No trees. Glenwyn's full of them, oaks and elms and pines, but not here, not one. Like nothing wanted to grow on that soil anymore. I parked across the street and walked the perimeter. Sun was low, air was still. I found a break in the fence where someone had snipped the wire. I stepped through. The grass crunched under my boots. Dry, brittle. At the center of the lot was a manhole cover, new, not rusted, matte black, no city logo, no utility mark, just smooth steel with 5 small indentations around the rim. It didn't belong there. I checked with the town utilities later that night. There was no sewer line under Marley Street, nothing registered, no access point, no tunnels, but I saw it. I knelt and ran my fingers over the indentations. They formed a shape. 5 rings, just like the ones on Emily's aligned maps, just like the carving under the Marley house before it came down. I didn't open it, not because I was afraid, though I was, but because I don't think it opens from the top. I think it opens from below. That was the last time I set foot in that town, but the town doesn't need you to be there to find you. Since coming back, things have gotten louder, not literally. It's like the edges of things are starting to fray, like reality's glue is peeling off in thin layers. Sometimes my reflection lags by half a second when I brush my teeth. Sometimes I pass a window and see rooms I don't remember having. One night, I found a sketch on my fridge, not drawn but burned into the metal with what looked like heat. It was a spiral, tight, intricate. At the center, a single dot underneath, someone had etched 4 words. The 5th is missing. I don't know what that means, but it keeps showing up on receipts, scratched into the edges of stop signs, once carved into a library desk I swear was clean 10 minutes earlier. I started doing what I shouldn't have done. I started looking into other towns, places like Glenwyn, small, quiet, with stories they don't print in the papers. It's not just us. There's a town in Pennsylvania, Woodhurst, where a teacher vanished in 1997 after submitting an urban planning project drawn entirely in symbols that don't match any language. In Vermont, a boy drew a town no one had heard of, then disappeared on the way home from school. They found his drawing on a billboard 30 miles away, and in all of them, somewhere buried, was that same mark, the 5 rings, always 5, but now people are whispering about a 6th, a new structure that doesn't show up in the old maps. A place some drawings call the Echo Gate. I've only seen it once. It was in a dream, but not like before. This one was cold, not metaphorically. I woke up cold, frozen, like something had touched my spine. In the dream I was standing in a room underground. Stone walls, water dripping. At the center was a door with no handle. No hinges, just stone, but behind it something was knocking, not to get out, but to say, "I'm already here." I think the maps are no longer about finding something. I think they're about marking territory, and I think they're not being drawn by us anymore. We're just copying what's already there. So if your kid brings home a drawing of a place they've never been, if you find a map in a jacket you haven't worn in years, if you hear a 4th chime when the bell rings, don't throw it away, don't burn it, because it already knows you've seen it. And the 6th gate, it's just waiting to be remembered. I stopped answering the phone 2 months ago. Not because I was being paranoid, not because I was afraid of people asking questions, but because I started getting calls from numbers that didn't exist. No caller ID, no area code, just a blank screen and the ringtone sounding off at exactly 2:17 a.m. I picked up the first few times. Nothing on the line, no breathing, no static, just an open line, as if something on the other end was waiting for me to speak first. I never did. Then, one night I let it ring through. The voicemail auto kicked in, and it recorded something. 12 seconds. It started with a scraping noise, like metal being dragged across stone, then footsteps, slow, measured, like someone walking barefoot through a concrete hallway, and then a voice, faint, childlike, whispered, "The bell doesn't wake them. It's the drawing that does." I deleted the message immediately, or tried to. But it wouldn't disappear from my phone, even after I factory reset the device. It stayed in my voicemail archive, the timestamp glitching between August 8, 1965 and no date. Eventually, the phone just died. Screen black, no battery response. I threw it into the river behind the property. That was the night I started hearing scratching beneath my floor, not rats, not pipes drawing like charcoal on drywall. I tore up half my living room with a crowbar, certain I'd find something. I didn't. But when I patched the boards back together, I noticed it. Someone or something had etched the 5-ring symbol into the underside of one of the planks. Old, deep, not fresh. Like it had been waiting there long before I moved in, like the house had already been claimed. I started keeping the lights on at night, every room, bright as possible. But the shadows got thicker anyway. I know how that sounds, but I don't mean that poetically. I mean the dark started bending around the edges of things. Like it had weight, and every now and then, just at the corner of my vision, I'd see shapes that weren't there a second ago. They never moved, never breathed, just waited. I think they're the ones who draw now. I think we're just the paper. Last week, someone slid an envelope under my door. No knock, no footsteps on the gravel, just an envelope sitting there at dawn. Inside was a single Polaroid of a staircase, cracked concrete, no railing going down forever. It was familiar, but not from any case file, not from a dream. It was my staircase, the one in my trailer. But in the photo, it didn't end. It curved, spiral-like, into darkness on the back of the photo. In that same child's hand. We haven't stopped building. I checked my floor again. Nothing, no opening, no trapdoor. But at night, if I walk across the kitchen barefoot, I swear I can feel a draft rising upward. A cold that pulses every few seconds like breath through stone lungs. I think the town is gone, but the map isn't. I think it's expanding, not in space, but in memory. And the more we try to forget, the deeper it grows. That's the thing no one tells you about these cases, the ones that don't close, the ones that don't have neat endings or villains in mugshots. Sometimes what we're chasing isn't a person. Sometimes it's a pattern, and once you see it, it sees you back. I don't think the kids were ever taken. I think they were drawn, layer by layer, memory by memory, until they were no longer walking on our streets, but through its. And I think, sooner or later, that's where we're all headed, one corner at a time, one chime at a time, one map at a time, and when the last one is finished, there won't be a town to come back to, because the town will come to us. It's not just me anymore. About a month ago, I got a letter, real envelope, stamp and all. No return address, but the handwriting looked familiar. Slanted, hesitant, like someone wrote with their non-dominant hand. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a map different from the others. This one had streets I recognized, names I knew personally, not from old files or testimonies, but from memory. My childhood street, the intersection where my first accident occurred, the lot behind my old elementary school, but they weren't placed where they belonged. They'd been rearranged, folded into new angles, forming a spiral, leading toward a center marked only with a shape. 5 rings, 1 dot in the middle at the bottom of the page, written in a firm, unfamiliar hand. You've been walking in it your whole life. I put the paper in a drawer and locked it. 3 nights later, I woke up with ink on my fingers, black, smudged, same pattern, faint lines on my skin like streets I didn't remember walking. The spiral again, but now more detailed. Smaller rings branching off the original 5, as if the town wasn't growing, it was replicating. I've stopped trying to explain this. Stopped looking for logic in case reports and blueprints. There are no coordinates, no dates to chase, just signs, patterns, whispers in ink and shadow. There's a name I keep seeing now, on the edge of mirrors, on the last page of discarded books at the library, written in pencil on the back of my grocery receipts, Echo Circle. Sometimes it's a location, sometimes a structure. Once it was written like a signature. I've never spoken it aloud. I don't think I'm supposed to, because every time I see it, something else shows up too, a kind of vibration, like a low hum just behind reality. Like the sound of a distant machine you can't hear directly, only feel in your teeth. I went back to the manhole outside what used to be Marley Street. I don't know why. Maybe to check if it was still sealed, maybe to see if the pattern was gone. It wasn't. The rings were still there, but now they weren't empty. Each ring had a faint mark inside, a symbol. I didn't recognize any of them except the last, a small triangle with a line through it. That's the same symbol Emily drew once. In the corner of a map labeled Last Route Out. She never explained what it meant. I think I understand now. It's not a direction, it's a lock, and someone or something has been drawing keys for years, in crayon, in fire, in dreams. I think the missing girls, Lila, Alyssa, Emily, weren't taken from us. They were taken out of order, moved into some space that touches ours only when memory misfires. When the bell rings. When someone draws too much of something they're not supposed to see. That's what the dreams have become, not fear, not nightmares, but instructions not written in words, but in structure. I see buildings now when I sleep, not broken, incomplete, waiting to be filled in, and sometimes I see others in the dream. Silhouettes in windows, behind stairwells, beneath street lamps that never flicker, and I know them not by name, but by pattern. They're the ones who kept drawing. The ones who went too far down, and I think they're still sketching, finishing what someone else started. So if one day you wake up and find a paper beside your bed, one you didn't write, with roads that feel familiar but wrong, don't trace them, don't look for where they lead, because the map isn't for you. It's of you. I know how this sounds. I do. If I were you, sitting behind a screen, I'd call bullshit too. Because it's easier that way. It's easier to believe this is just the story of a burned house, a missing kid, an unsolved case that's stuck in the brain of a washed-up ex-cop who spent too long chasing ghosts in his filing cabinet. And part of me wants you to believe that. Because if you don't believe me, if none of this rings true, then maybe that means it hasn't gotten to you yet. Maybe your streets still line up. Maybe your stairs still stop where they should. Maybe your reflection still blinks at the same time you do. But if it doesn't, if even one thing I've said felt familiar, the bell, the drawings, the feeling like your memories belong to someone else, then listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Because this is the part no one says out loud. This is the part where you realize it was never about the missing girl, it was about the space she left behind. After I got that last map, the one showing my childhood street warped into a spiral, I decided I wasn't going to run anymore. You can't outrun a pattern, you can only choose how you meet it. I went back to where it started, or at least where I started. My old home in Glenwyn, long since sold to another family. I parked a few blocks away, waited until midnight, then walked the familiar sidewalk under a black sky. The town was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence you only hear in places that have been forgotten correctly. The Marley lot was fenced off again, a new chain link, taller this time, with a lock that hadn't rusted yet. But the grass inside looked wrong, flat, pressed down in geometric shapes like something heavy had passed over it in slow concentric loops. In the center stood a structure, small, square, no windows. I hadn't seen it before, there was no record of it in county permits. No lights, no door, just 4 walls and a roof, standing like a monolith on the earth that had burned more than once. I climbed the fence, crossed the lot. The closer I got, the quieter everything became. I don't mean sound faded, I mean it left. No wind, no blood in my ears. Even my thoughts felt hollow, like the building was eating them. The walls weren't made of wood or metal, they were chalkboard black covered in drawings. Layers upon layers. Children's hands, maps, spirals, symbols, names, and one word etched over and over, remember. I stood there until dawn. When the sun came up, the building was gone. I told no one. There's no one left to tell. I left Glenwyn that morning for the last time. But I didn't leave alone, because here's the truth, and it's the part one never wanted to write. I think the town is inside me now, not metaphorically, literally. I'll walk into a room and find a corner I don't remember. Open a drawer and find paper that wasn't there yesterday. Once I looked out my window and saw a street that doesn't exist, but I knew its name. And the dreams, they've changed. They're not dreams anymore. They're shifts, places I go, things I build, maps I never mean to draw. But I wake up and they're on the wall, and lately I've been hearing something new, not the bell. A voice faint far off. It says you're almost finished. I don't know what that means, but I'm afraid to find out. So this is my last post, my last report, my last attempt to put words to something that was never meant to be described. Because I think, deep down, this was never about solving anything. This was about documenting it, mapping it, preserving it for whatever comes next. And if you've read this far, if you've felt the pull of a place you've never been, if your child wakes up talking about the house with the steps that go down forever, if you hear the bell and count 4 chimes, just know, you've been marked, you're part of the drawing now, and the map remembers what the world forgets. So when you find yourself walking a street that doesn't show up on GPS, when you reach a building that shouldn't exist, when you open a door and see stairs going down when they should be going up, you'll know, you've reached the edge of Glenwyn Hollow, of the 5th gate, of the memory that never belonged to you. Don't run, don't scream, just look around carefully. Because someone left the door open a long time ago, and we've been drawing it shut ever since, but it never really closed, not all the way, not for people like us, not for people who remember.